Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you with us, joining us for our webinar. We will be starting in just a moment. For those of you who have joined, thank you very much for being here. Again, it's the top of the hour. We're going to give it another 1 or 2 minutes for people to join. In the meantime, it would be great if you could put in chat who you are, where you're calling from, where you're dialing in from, so to speak. I guess we date ourselves and we say that now, do we? Where you are joining from, and again, introduce yourselves, as we'd like to encourage folks to engage in conversation as well. Also, you'll see there's a poll on the screen, and it's relating to the upcoming conferences at AASA, Superintendent's Conference, or AACTE. For those of you who are planning to come, we will actually be at both of those conferences. Would love to see you, but just would love to know what your plans are, and we will begin momentarily. Okay, welcome everyone. We'll get started. Thank you for those of you who have introduced yourselves. Again, welcome, and please continue to introduce yourselves and obviously communicate amongst and share any questions that you have during the course of, and we will certainly attempt to get to them. My name is Ken Spiro. I'm the president and founder of School Sims, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar today. These webinars are always a lot of fun. We hope to both share with you content, information, within the premise of theory into practice. There will be some theory, and then there'll be some practice. And so it's something that allows us to embed into the same kind of thing, but really to focus on our operating premise, which is that experience is the best teacher. And especially when we're dealing with something like the concept of respect and fostering respect with students, amongst ourselves. Respect is something we can talk about, but doing it is a challenge. And how do you continue to demonstrate respect or things like that when you're in difficult situations and when we're being reactive and emotions are flying and whatever the case may be? It's difficult for adults, and it's even more difficult in certain circumstances for kids. But how do we manage that as teachers, as instructors? And so for us, this is an opportunity really to utilize the modality of simulation because it allows us to focus on that opportunity for scalable experience. I'm joined today by Dr. Andrea Mayfield from University of West Alabama, and we'll introduce her shortly. And she was our collaborator in this work, in this particular simulation. And again, I will come back to introduce her momentarily. But really, in this idea of harnessing scalable experience to focus on skills like respect and things, contextual elements when it comes to teaching, when it comes to leading in a classroom. The one thing that is certain is the uncertainty. The one thing that is true is that you're never going to be right for everybody and everything, right? So how do we manage our way through that? And that's the only way we can do that is through experience. As we know, we wouldn't put a pilot in a plane or a doctor or nurse into a patient suite without hours of simulation. We believe the same applies into education. We wouldn't, when we think about the stakes, these are high stakes industries, but education is equally high staked relative to these are our kids, these are the future of our kids. And so being able to make the best decision we can, being able to deal with these things as they come up and deal with what happens after, right? One of the key challenges that I think is present in much of the scenario-based training that is out there is the focus on the one and done, right? We focus on a situation and talk about it like a case study. And it's a very robust conversation and it's wonderful. And I don't mean to diminish that approach in any way. But the question is what happens after we make that choice, right? There's no such thing as, again, that one and done concept. There is blowback. There is consequences. There is a next step. There is tomorrow. Even when we make horrible mistakes, there's still tomorrow, right? We have to pick up the pieces and we have to move on and we have to continue to operate. How do we practice that? And that's really what we use simulations to do. And so when we're dealing with blended learning, if you will, right? There's the instructional elements that need to be taught, and then there's the opportunity to practice them in a realistic, authentic way. And that's really the goal of simulation. And so what we're talking about is a branching narrative, essentially, that's browser-based, that's online. And again, so I'm going to share a little bit about the concept of that, but then we're going to get into actually demonstrating in a content area in which we're going to talk about the content as well as provide an opportunity for practice, and we'll engage in the simulation together as a group. But really, it is a choose-your-own-adventure type exercise, and you'll begin to see that in a moment. And fundamentally, when it comes to experience and scalable experience, it's important that we can provide these experiences to our students wherever they are, however they're learning, whether it's in person, whether it's virtual synchronously, or whether it's asynchronous, or any combination of the above, right? There's no shortage of experiences that we need to have to get better at what we do, right? Teachers can never stop, right? They're always experiencing. The question is how do we make sure that they have the opportunity to reflect on the experiences they're having? How do we practice that so that they can learn and move on? They can learn and improve, because every day is a new day and every day is filled with new experiences. And we need to be able to process them so that we can get better, both when it's risk-free, which is a simulation, but also when we're actually in the classroom. So that's really what we're focused on. And really to deal with issues such as respect, one of the things that's important and what simulation allows us to do is really to focus on the critical thinking aspect. And we do that by placing these into a context. If we don't want to overgeneralize, right? Because if you do go too broad, then you lose sight of any depth. So every sim that we create is actually done in a context. It takes place somewhere. It's not my school, but it could be. And it's not my people, but they could be, in terms of we use video and text as opposed to avatars. And the goal for that is, even though it may not be your context, and maybe there's some unique things to the context inside in which it was developed, and you'll find this simulation was designed around the context in Alabama. But the opportunity in situational awareness, which is a key skill for anybody in education, right? Whether you're teaching, counseling, leading, administrating, understanding, being situationally aware of where you are and when you are, with whom you are, is a critical component to effective decision making. And it's important to realize that when I'm making by what's in front of me, I may actually observe what's not there, what's different. And that's an opportunity for further reflection, when I can see myself in the action and see how these things pertain to me. So in that vein, I'd like to come back now to introduce this is our library. We have a library of these experiences. So when we talk about scalable experience, you can have a variety of them. There's a library for leadership. There's a library for teachers, a library for counselors, really focusing on problems of practice at those levels, right? So you will play the role of a teacher, an administrator, a counselor, and you will make decisions in that role as yourself, but in that role in a series of contexts that allow you to, again, have experiences that you can both practice and also reflect upon for development. Now, with that in mind, I will introduce Dr. Andrea Mayfield, who is the director of Project GROW at the University of Alabama, West Alabama, and she's also a professor on staff in the Graduate School of Education. And with that, Dr. Mayfield, take it away.
Thank you, Ken. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start today by talking a little bit about Project GROW and what we do. And I want to focus on the role that simulation plays in that work. So Project Grow is a grant-funded project funded by the Kern Family Foundation. And what we do is to facilitate virtues development in ourselves and others, in schools, among our students, and leaders and teachers who are already practicing in the field. Project Grow also provides ongoing training and support for educators, helping them to navigate education challenges. As you know, education today is filled with new and different challenges than we had, I don't know, 20 years ago. One of the things that we are doing as part of Project Grow and the College of Education is weaving virtues throughout the undergraduate and graduate credit programs as part of our approach to teaching. We are also integrating virtues development in the way that we interact with other people and how we shape our future teachers and leaders. So to do that, I want to talk a little bit about the SIM now and how we are facilitating that process. So we are working with current school leaders and current school teachers in the field through professional development, ongoing training. We also are engaging with our credit programs here in the College of Education to teach students who are preparing to be school teachers or school leaders. We call these individuals, when they finish, the empowered practitioners, which is very important because they embody all of the attributes or virtues that we are focused on as part of our program. Next slide, please. So these are the attributes that the College of Education at the University of West Alabama selected to incorporate as part of the curriculum. And this is why we chose respect, because we feel like here at UWA that respect is foundational. Without it, nothing else works effectively. So we focused on respect this time. And what we're doing is we're weaving all of these virtues throughout the curriculum so that we are developing these virtues not only in students, but in ourselves and those that we engage in training. Next slide, please. What we do with the simulation is that we have actually embedded simulation experiences as part of our courses in undergraduate and graduate programs. And what's important to note is that these simulations are embedded as part of faculty staff training programs or development, but primarily on the credit side for students who aspire to be future teachers and leaders, those that are aspiring to be those empowered practitioners. We also are working, as I mentioned, with current practitioners in the field, providing them with support and professional development opportunities that may incorporate simulation experiences. What's important to note about how we do this is that within each course where these simulations are embedded, they are at strategic points so that we are providing the learner with opportunities to experience how they apply what they have learned. And again, experience how they apply what they have learned, because there's nothing like experience. The simulation that you all will see today, actually that you will experience today, was designed to give the participant really the opportunity to experience a school environment with its challenges and rewards, and to use respect as their guide be immersed in this simulated environment, allowing them opportunities to feel what they're feeling, explore their emotions, feel stress in the moment. We did add some stressors, which is important. This also gives them an opportunity to consider choice. Consider these choices, make a decision, make a choice, and then live with the consequences. Well, in reality, when we do that, there is no going back. You live the consequences and continue forward. In this case, you are going to experience whatever consequence is associated with whatever choice you have made. And then what we do is we incorporate reflection. There is a reflection piece that we engage with our students so that they can think, have a conversation, and really consider, did I make the best choice for the best outcome? Or should I have considered doing something else based on what happens? So as we go through the simulation today, you will find that there are multiple reflection points for you to think about these things, and that will also stimulate conversation as we go into some of the breakout rooms. And what I wonder, after you have conversations about the choice you made, I wonder if perhaps you would have made a different choice after hearing from your colleagues. This particular simulation storyline is designed with many challenges that we face in our school environments today. As you go through the simulation, you are in the role of a teacher. Imagine being a new teacher faced with many different situations coming at you all at once. You're under stress, you have obligations, and as Ken said, things happen. How you choose to respond is going to direct your path of engagement. It does. And this will result in consequences that impact the situation at hand. It will impact you as this teacher, the people around you, and it also impacts the storyline. So your choice is going to impact a number of different things. As a new teacher, your choices are going to cultivate either a positive school culture, foster connections with students, staff, and teachers, provide opportunities for growth and development, or something else. Will your choices that you make be based on your emotions? And if they are, will the result be more chaos or secondary problems, perhaps? Frustration, defeat. Is teaching for you or not for you? All of these things are important parts of the simulation because, again, it is based on real situations and provides a comprehensive experience so that you actually live it. You live your choices. So with that said, let's explore the simulation. And as we do that, this is what I want you to look for. If you'll go back one slide, Ken. Respect is examined relative to respect for self, others, property, and learning. So as we go through the sim, think about examples of respect or lack thereof that relate to these four. Also, as we go through the simulation, look for the interactions, evidence of respect or lack of respect between teacher and other teachers, student to student, student teacher, teacher student, administrator teacher, and teacher administrator. And there's a reason they are listed that way in that order, because sometimes lack of respect may be facilitated initially by a student or by a teacher or by an administrator, which affects the situation and impacts the choices and consequences as a result. So next slide, please. So I want you to think about this. Pretend that you are a new teacher. You are getting ready for your first day in an education setting. You're in an environment that's very fast-paced, a lot of changes, very complex situations. There's a lot of pressure on you and your various roles. You've got multiple responsibilities, and then you throw in politics, and you see it there. It gives you a headache. What we don't want is for our students to step inside the classroom environment that first day and decide, wow, I can't do this, or wow, I don't want to do this. This is overwhelming. So our simulations really serve as a precursor to their field experience. It gives them experiences with consequences in a safe environment and allows them opportunities to make choices and live through the consequences. Virtue links and aligns with this effort simply because we are developing these empowered practitioners, these leaders and teachers that have the practical wisdom and the decision-making skills that will ultimately transform schools. They will be change agents. They will shape school culture and achievement such that that impacts human flourishing. All right, so are you ready for an experience? Ken, we'll get started.
Sounds good. So as you see, when we're launching a sim, this is kind of the landing page, and what you have here is an overview of the sim and also which of the standards are at play. One thing that's important, obviously, respect manifests, but there are other standards as well, because there's no such thing as a vacuum, right? You don't step into a vacuum where there's only one thing going on. We have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, and sometimes these things there's trade-offs embedded even within the standards, let alone social emotional issues or other aspects in which stakeholder management, in which ultimately consequences follow based on the decision making we have. And this is the kind of stuff that the modality of simulation allows us to capture the flow of time.
Welcome to the Respect in the School Environment simulation, created by School Sims together with Project Grow at the University of West Alabama College of Education. Select the next button to begin.
It comes as no surprise that respect for self, others, and property is regarded as a foundational virtue, vital to character. Respect is often defined as a way of treating or thinking about someone that demonstrates our regard for and consideration of others. Respect is something that must be practiced every day and requires time to reflect on our interactions, the outcomes of those interactions, and what we might choose to do differently. Reflection provides these opportunities to consider alternatives and the potential impact of choosing to interact in a different manner. These reflection moments cause us to think about, from multiple perspectives, how we engage other people, which allows us to facilitate our own growth and development to have a better understanding of our total impact. In this simulation, you will have the opportunity to engage with a group of students and work to influence how they respond to each other and to situations that arise in the classroom. You will be presented with scenarios and make decisions that will determine how the story unfolds. Your choices will draw on your self-awareness, your social awareness, and your sense of judgment. You will also have opportunities to reflect on your course of action. At the end of the simulation, you will be provided with a feedback report that will offer some insights regarding the choices you make.
Your role. You are in your second year as a middle school classroom teacher in a rural exurban school district. Your school has limited resources. It is mid-October. At this point in the school year, all of your students have learned and are demonstrating expected classroom behaviors. The day has started and your first lesson of the day went well. So far, today is a great day. The key characters in this simulation include Keisha, a new student who has moved to your school from a large northern city. She has been retained at her previous school, requiring her to repeat the 7th grade, so she is older than the other students in your class. Jamarcus, your designated peer helper, who has been assigned to welcome new students and help them acclimate to the new school environment. And Haley, a student in the class who moved to your school last year from a large southwestern city. As you consider taking on the role of a teacher in this context, what techniques might you generally employ to heighten the level of respect in the classroom, both among students and between students and teacher?
All right, so we have consideration boxes that appear before you actually see the various circumstances where the action takes place that will give you choices. This is designed really to get your feedback on the front end and then look at what your considerations reflected after you've experienced the simulation. So Ken, do you want them to type in or we're just demonstrating?
No, so what we'd like to
Type
do
something in?
what we'd like to do is actually take an opportunity to open up the breakouts and have
Okay.
you go into the breakouts and take just a couple of minutes to introduce yourselves to the folks with you in the room and answer the question, right? So just talk about
Yep.
it for a minute. Like, what are the things that at this point in time, right? You have a little bit of context. You haven't seen the classroom yet. But what are the things that you're going to do? What kind of techniques might you employ?
Yep.
Or would you want your students to employ, right? So, I mean, in terms of who the target is, but in terms of utilizing this as a starting point, if you will, and then we'll reconvene and see if we can populate in chat a couple of the things that maybe came out in discussion. But let's take 3 minutes, and Nick, if you can open up the breakouts and assign people, that would be great. And again, introduce yourselves to each other, so you know who you are, and then we'll come back in a few minutes. If you want to put in chat some things that came up in your group that maybe you'd like to share. You know, the goal of this approach is really, again, to provide that opportunity. We're going to give choices at sometimes, but sometimes to want to know kind of open-ended what the thinking is and the opportunity for critical thinking in the context of the groups. So please feel free to post in chat, and we can and the information, by the way, just so you know, from a logistics perspective, is captured from what's written here and is placed into the feedback report with some considerations about things that maybe you ought to be thinking about. But again, that opportunity for reflection at the end of the simulation. Anybody want to share? Thank you, Bob. Thank you for that. Okay, so remind students of the culture that we are developing and expectations around respect in the classroom. Anybody else?
We just talked about this is going to be our priority, that we're going to take time to welcome her, that we're going to have some kind of procedures for new students. We're going to make sure we introduce her to the liaison, the ambassador, I forgot what they referred to him as, and maybe even take the opportunity to do a little class team building, a little short activity of some type.
That's great. Thank you. Forgive the spelling. So this is the process we would go through. Obviously, the opportunity, whether you're doing this synchronously or asynchronously, would continue. In the interest of time, though, I think we will continue. So, Andrea, I will submit, and we will proceed.
Transition to math. It's time to transition to today's math lesson. You are prepared and feel good about taking the students through the material in your lesson plan. The action begins.
Good morning. We have a new student, Keisha Rush, who will be joining your class.
Welcome, Keisha. Come on in. Keisha, this is Jamarcus. He's our student helper. He will help you get settled.
Here, let me help you with that.
Don't touch me, you jerk.
No progression.
What would you do now?
All right, so here's another opportunity for you to think about how you're going to approach the situation. What are your competing priorities in terms of how you want to address what happened, or do you? Feel free to add something to the chat. So remember, I talked about the level of respect and the engagement between student, teacher, teacher, administrator, and so forth. We talked about property, self, others, and learning. Think about those things as we go through each of these scenes.
And in the interest of time, I think we'll just jump to the choices.
All right, let's do that.
One goes to the choices right away, although somebody just chime in.
So we're gonna release a poll. And I want you all to tell us what you would choose.
Just grab these couple of
Okay.
entry points. Okay. This gets captured, and now we get to
What will you do now? Choices are below. Thank Jamarcus and step in and take control. Choose Haley to help orient Keisha. Or tell Keisha that you will not tolerate that type of behavior in your classroom.
All right, so
as you're filling this out, there are 5 options in the poll. There are only 3 choices. So choose 1, 2, or 3 if you like one of those 3. If you don't like those 3, but you have a different option in mind, choose 4. And we'll come back to that and see how we proceed from there. Let's take 10 more seconds. Okay, so as we can see, right, we have a pretty heavy dominance with choice 1. Andrew, is it okay if we put them back into the breakouts for a minute?
Yes, let's do. Take a
So why
minute
don't we
and
go into
discuss.
breakouts and talk about what choice you made and why, and listen to what others have to say. We do have some diversity of opinion here. So, and please talk about, especially those who who chose choice 4, what other choice you would make.
In the chat, list some of the reasons why you chose choice 1 or 2 or 3. And we'll see what happens as we navigate that pathway after making choice number 1.
And one of the questions that we'd love to know, if anybody in the discussions, as Andrea had mentioned earlier, didn't the discussions in the group cause you to want to change your choice? Upon reflection or upon further information, if you were asked to ask the poll again, would you choose differently based on the insights from folks in your group? Just curious if anybody experienced that, and would love to see that in chat as well. Anyone want to share?
One comment, I see wording of choices made it difficult. Yes, I would have chose something differently. I didn't see a need to change my choice, but learned more options to consider.
And this is, one of the things that, I think was it Roy who said about the wording? James. That's an important, right? That's part of the context, right? I mean, we are obviously, things that sometimes it's things are phrased here, maybe in ways that you wouldn't necessarily phrase them, but it is important. Obviously, language is key. What words are used, when they're used, how they're used, with whom they're used, and being able to reflect on even that level of detail. Is a critical opportunity for critical thinking. It's important to remember that in a sim, our goal is not to get it right. The goal here is to have an experience, which means if you think it shouldn't have gone that way or you think there should be other options, that's great. Let's talk about it, because that's the goal of the opportunity to put folks into an experience context and to get other insights. So, again, that's why it's important to blend it with the instruction, because that's where there is a right and a wrong. Right? We teach what you need to know. We teach the right way to do it, so to speak, conceptually. And then this is the opportunity where it's muddy, where it's the opportunity is where it's just not clear what to do. And now you have to be able to exercise judgment. And it's that opportunity to reflect upon your approach and then to hear in the social context other people's equally valid approaches, which may be compelling and may not be compelling in terms of how you approach things, but it's equally beneficial and developmental to hear other ways of doing things anyway.
And the outcome may compel you to make a different choice as well.
Okay. And thank you all for your feedback, and really keep it coming, because it's wonderful to be able to interact in this way, and to get insights from people's experiences, because everybody's coming from different places, different levels of experience, different levels of knowledge. So thank you for that. But given where we are, Andrea, are you good with us choosing one?
Yes, let's do.
Now, one thing you'll note is that, as was mentioned, right, there's no back button, which means no mulligans in a sim. You go down the path, you're on that path, and you're going to live it. There will be the opportunity to play it again if you want to see an alternative path, but it's important in the realm of consequences to be able to make decisions and live with what happens both immediately and after.
Thank you, Jamarcus. You can take your seat now. Keisha, this is Haley. Have a seat next to her.
Hey. Hey. Absolutely.
Engaging with Keisha. After getting Keisha settled next to Haley, the students are taking notes on tablet devices. Keisha does not have a tablet device, so you offer her a piece of paper to take notes on. She responds rudely.
I don't have a pencil.
It's 10:45. You are concerned about your 11 o'clock meeting with the principal and are still upset about the altercation between Keisha and Jamarcus earlier that morning. You have concerns about future problems with Keisha and the potential for behavior setbacks in your class. Now you are also behind schedule and teaching the math lesson you were beginning when Keisha arrived. What will you do? Choices below. Continue teaching the math lesson, hoping to finish before the bell rings at 10:50, signaling the transition to PE. Ask Haley to share the classroom protocols for getting a pencil. Or tell Jamarcus you'd like to speak with him later to reestablish your relationship with him.
Okay, so now the pressure is on. You've got obligations throughout the day. Now you've seen an interaction again with Keisha for the second time. What do? What takes priority here in this situation? How do you handle that? So we are looking at the poll. It looks like choice number 2 is the most selected.
We do have a few 4s. So in the interest of time, if anybody, and especially anybody who chose 4, wants to chime in with respect to what the other choice is, we'll take a second for that. But it is one of the things. Yes, Dr. Hodge.
I would do, my 4 was all of the above. I try to continue teaching. I tell Jamarcus I need to see him afterwards so I can reestablish that. Ask Haley to show Keisha and keep on going. But there's a time that you have to address all 3 of those items individually.
That's good.
And what's important to note, and I'm so glad that you teed up one of the points I wanted to make before. One of the things that simulation allows us to do is to parse time, right? Because you look at this and you go, yeah, I do all of those. But the question is, what would you do first? So what would you put as your priority? Because we can only do one thing at a time. So what would you start with? And then obviously that it's important, and that'll be part of the discussion. You certainly want students to note, right? That by choosing one, you're not disregarding the others. But what would you lead with in terms of the approach that you're going to take? And again, it just forces that from an implementation, from an execution perspective. What do you lead with? Because that obviously sets a tone potentially with what else you're going to be doing, either reflecting upon the past or thinking about what's coming. And so it does allow us to do that so that we can encourage students to think that way.
Yep.
But
All
thank
right,
you.
so most people chose number 2. Ken, you want to go ahead and see what happens before we go to, or do you want to go to breakout now?
In this class, when you need, I don't need no help, you stupid girl.
Are you sure you want to send these students to PE? Yes. It's important to keep your meeting with the principal. Or no, addressing the issues with these students is more important than meeting with the principal right now.
All right, so we're going to release a poll again. So this time we'll go into a breakout room, and I want you to talk about why you chose one or two. Why is it more important to prioritize one over the other? I wanted to say, it was suggested that, yes, address the student issues, but she also noted, make sure the principal knows why I'm not coming.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. That would be. Well, one can assume that right, one can read that into the story, right? That you would, but you'd have to find the time to do that. Pretty tight.
For those that chose yes, it's important to keep your meeting with the principal. Would you change that choice? Would you make a different choice?
You have to ask that again because people were just coming back when you asked.
If for those who selected choice number one, yes, it's important to keep your meeting with the principal. After your colleagues, would you have still chosen number one, or would you have changed your direction and prioritized meeting with the students? You want to put that in the chat too? Yes, who was speaking?
This is Dwayne Ross.
Dwayne?
I probably I don't believe that the two choices available are sufficient or appropriate. As I shared in the small breakout room, this young lady already she's amped up. Her body language is defensive, and so in my opinion, this behavior that she's showing now with the class that was present in the beginning. And so I would look at my counselor, look at who, depending on the way that the school leadership is configured, but definitely giving them a little bit more information because it seems like they are not fully prepared for her, I guess, emotions right now, if that makes sense. I'll stop.
It does. That's good. Anybody else?
Hi, everybody. Adam Fantastico. I agree with Dwayne. I actually originally had put down yes, keep the appointment, but my idea was immediately I said, "Oh no, we're done. We're going to the principal." When I saw that action take place. However, I do like what I heard Dwayne say about the counselor. I think that would lessen the severity, even though it is a serious situation, because obviously this young lady has some emotional issues going on that we have to address. So, taking her with me towards the office and saying, "Hey, listen, we're going to go talk with the counselor, get to know each other a little better, talk about the culture of the school, and I just want you to know that we're here to support you no matter what." And explain that it can be stressful being the first day new student, maybe even sort of speak in a perspective that you've been there before. I've been a new student before. So just to make her feel maybe a bit better there too. So, but I liked Dwayne's response.
Do as well.
That's great. And it's important to note, and thank you both for that. I mean, I think this is the kind of this is what we use to provoke, right? Depending on the experience level of the students, right? How much they know, how much where they're coming from, et cetera. How much would they know in terms of being able to respond that thoughtfully? But even when there is that opportunity, right? You want to get that discussion going. Now we're gonna, right? As in life, right? We can't always, we intend something and it doesn't play out exactly the way we intended, or we'd like to do something, but we don't have that option due to constraints in the circumstance. Are we prepared with option B? So we do force to some degree, right? Some of that but it's still, we want to create that space in which the conversation can be had. And what role does climate have? You know, is there respect that was there respect from the principal in dropping the student into the room? What should have happened prior to that? Did it just happen that the principal didn't know that this was coming today? And what is the guidance that teachers normally get when a new student is brought into the classroom? Or whatever the case may be, right? All of these things are important to note and are worthy of discussion, and especially in the context of what else is happening in the class, right? So part of this is it cannot be separated from the instructional component with which this is partnered, right? Because this is an opportunity to apply and to provoke discussion, which may lead into the next class, right? So when we think about the opportunity for the blend, the opportunity to incorporate both the theory with the practice, so that a more full, more robust experience can be had for students, that's kind of the role. And that's the objective that this approach can, you know, obviously what we set out to do and how it's being applied, certainly at University of West Alabama, and obviously anybody else that's interested. In the interest of time, we are going to have to pause here in the simulation. It would continue. There's a series of decisions beyond. Sims typically take in a synchronous mode around an hour to do, and at that point you'd get the feedback report. But I did want to just really quickly, first of all, if anybody's interested in seeing more of the simulation, please reach out and let us know. Also, if anybody's interested in a certificate for continuous learning purposes, please let us know. We can issue that if that's something that you would want to give to your district or is important for other requirements. By all means, please let us know. We can send you a certificate. We also want to announce, I'm going to come back to these questions in just a moment because we had asked in the registration for those of you who had thoughts you wanted to incorporate. We have 2 new Sims coming up. We'll hopefully have one of them in a webinar in March on mental health, and another one on managing classroom disruptions. So please, if you're interested in learning more, please reach out to us. You can use the QR code. If you have a few minutes to stay, we'll love to open it up to questions and also to reflect upon some of the things that got submitted. But we do want to take into account your time, and if you have a hard stop at the top of the hour, to respect that. But if you are interested in staying, if you have additional questions, please submit in chat. We will stick around. And here's some of the questions that were asked for those of you interested. How can simulations contribute to maintaining freedom of speech while fostering a culture of respect? I mean, I think that's a great question. You know, the goal in a sim is to provoke, if you will, as we talked about, and to allow for that space, right? And we've had situations in which, you know, without intention, right, a situation can trigger a student for whatever reason, who needs a reason, right? But, you know, something that comes into their mind, and it created a space in which the question can be asked why, and to engage in that conversation, because everything is valid, right? This is your perspective. The whole goal of a sim is to appreciate your perspective on a context and to create a space in which it can be talked about, because your perspective is valid, right? Everybody's perspective is valid. Now the question is what do we do about that? That's something that can hopefully be done together. But we've had experiences where a student was in that kind of situation and was then able to share what triggered them. And that created a space for really significant insight to the rest of the class, because the experience of this one student was based on their lived experience and the way they think and the way they process, which was different than everybody else. And in a space in which it was shared, they were able to gain tremendous insight. We love hearing from a student, I never would have thought of it that way, which is just a wonderful thing to see happen. So that's kind of that space where it's a safe space. Speak your mind and let's talk about it. And really this is in a context, right? So this is taking place in this school or in another school, but obviously it's within the confines of the subject matter and the confines of the experience. So that's kind of how I just, Andrea, would you add to that?
You nailed it. I would say that the reflective opportunity is important, being able to have that conversation and really hear diversity and perspective and think about it yourself. What if I could do this over? How might I do it differently? It's learning through experience, and then the reflective piece supports that.
Thank you. In terms of the second question, what is the significance? And by the way, please feel free to comment in chat, or if you want to add to that, please let us know. So again, this is that opportunity for the back and forth. The significance of simulations in teacher ed. So I think we talked about that. I mean, the importance of practice, right? There is no shortage every day, right? Everything's unprecedented until we experience it, and we experience unprecedented things every day, multiple times a day. And so the opportunity to have that space in which we can practice, where there's no students on the other side, is very important. In what ways can simulations be utilized to develop disciplinary approaches that are culturally sensitive and mindful of mental health considerations? Again, I mean, the opportunity to create a context in which something is happening, and giving choices that are reflective of appropriate, culturally sensitive, and mindful of mental health, or, right, to give choices where they have to consider different things authentically, in terms of ways of responding. And what comes to mind? Do they like the choices? Do they not like the choices? We can offer opportunities for reflection within the choices, but really to understand what the implications, not just of the choice, but then to experience the consequences when you get it wrong, right? So you make the culturally insensitive choice. Okay, maybe it seemed, because if we word it properly, right? If we word it in an engaging kind of way, even though it's insensitive, right? It can be couched in terms that maybe not so obviously culturally insensitive. Then it allows you to step into that, and then to experience the consequences of, oh, wow. Again, there's not a real person on the other end here. It's a simulation, but it is that opportunity to experience even a negative consequence, but in an opportunity for, well, why did that happen? And now we reflect and we begin to think about, what did I miss? And again, we can provide some of that insights in the feedback, but it is an opportunity to put people in the situations in which, look, if we teach this stuff, how to be culturally sensitive, right? It all makes sense until it's not clear. Life is rarely clear, right? We don't have these large, we don't walk around with banners to be, how we be culturally sensitive, or what I need for you to be culturally sensitive to me. Some things are obvious, some things are not, and we just miss them. And so how do we make sure that we're a little bit more sensitized to those opportunities, whether it be cultural competence, whether it be mental health considerations? These are the kinds of things that we love to use this modality for, because we can be provocative, because we can be not offensive, but we can allow for that possibility where you can make mistakes and you can experience the real consequences, so that you don't do this when there's a child on the other end of it, or a staff member, or an administrator, or a parent, or whomever the case may be, or any combination thereof. Andrea, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, it goes back to the situation that you're in, and the increasing pressures of the job and stress, and what you do in the moment. Do your emotions dictate your choice, or do you think more with your head in the moment? How do you prioritize?
And one of the things we didn't get to, obviously, in the sim was we actually do start to ask, how are you feeling?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, Brene Brown calls it emotional granularity, right? A lot of times, especially with teachers, there's a lot of heat out there. We get emotional, right? We will have some kind of strong emotional response to a particular stimulus, and just reacting often doesn't end well. And so the question is how do we get people to pause? Don't react to the anger. Don't react in the stress. Don't react based on, how do we program in that breath, right? I'm a big fan of the Viktor Frankl quote. For those of you familiar with Viktor Frankl, it's a Holocaust survivor, psychiatrist, neuroscientist. Between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space is our power to choose. Right? By creating that space, by taking a breath and thinking first, right? If we can take some of the air out of that emotion by reflecting on the fact that what I'm feeling is valid, it's okay, but I need to think first before I actually make my decision. If we can do that, I think obviously that it just can end better, right? It doesn't mean that you're going to get it right, but at least you thought about it. And so the opportunity to incorporate that and to practice that. The other thing that we incorporate is uncertainty, right? That if you're looking for certainty, this is not the job. And so how do we get comfortable with the idea of making decisions anyway, even if I'm feeling uncertain, and having that manifest in, as you can imagine, you have the decision, how are you feeling before making the choice, and then reflecting on uncertainty after the choice. So again, these are some of the tools that we use to, those levers that we pull in this modality that make it, so compelling from the standpoint of being able to deal with some of these particular issues.
Then how does the consequence of one choice impact how you feel about making additional choices?
Yeah. How can simulations be used to help staff members grasp the distinction between discipline and punishment? Again, so that's just how we frame the scenario, and allow for people to do something that is discipline versus punishment, or other kinds of ways of framing that, in terms of how to reach and doing it with what students, right? So there are differences to have them reflect on, what you're feeling with this particular student, but is this what you would do if it were a different student? And to have that, the power of the video is really to allow for that visceral reaction, the bias that may be present, to reflect upon it. It's not pejorative, right? The goal here is not to judge, but to engage in that. What your visceral response is doesn't mean you have to do what your visceral response is. Again, to create that space, that pause, and to still respond appropriately. So be able to make that distinction between discipline and punishment. Again, the modality, again, in concert with the instruction, right? This is something that is married with, facilitation, with instruction, with a mentor or a coach, et cetera, so that that can be reflected upon and further developed.
So if the sim were to play out, and let's say you made the best choices, then you will see that the storyline is impacted. Keisha actually becomes a leader instead of a problem student. She becomes a leader. But it's based on interactions and choices the teacher made.
Going back to the point that Dwayne made earlier about the principal and the whole drop off and the potential of conflict between teacher and administrator, is that explored in a separate sim, or is that just an option that you could choose to make this a little more complex, or refocus from student teacher to teacher administrator?
Yes to all of your questions, because
Okay.
you can set up the context the way you want to and design the sim around what you're wanting to convey in terms of learning.
But the issue of the principal does come back. So
Yeah.
it wasn't just dropped in there to have you reflect upon it in the moment. Sometimes that is done.
Yeah.
Again, support the overall learning. But in this case, the trade-offs are important, because this is, clear stakeholder management, right? You've got the student, you've got the administration. They're not necessarily going to go hand in hand, or your classroom. And these are trade-offs that you need to be able to examine, and you're going to make a choice, and you better be prepared for the consequence, because you can't necessarily do both. And so, the design can be, and in this one it is, that the focus is really on the classroom, but the administrator does play out. And so in terms of being able to capture those, and then of course there are leadership sims that focus on that from a leader perspective, as well.
Thanks.
And sorry, yes. So, and then how can simulations support new teachers in balancing classroom order with maintaining a professional and friendly demeanor? So I think that we've kind of covered that. So hopefully that was answered. But other questions, thoughts, anything that we can respond to? Those of you stuck around, we appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. But again, any other questions, then feel free to just express them out loud. So we have, I think, few enough people here that we won't talk over each other.
I had a question.
Yes.
When the pandemic hit, did you guys see a rise in your product? Because I know it was hard to get, the practice with our candidates in the classroom setting. And I know a lot of people turn to different resources, but I just kind of wanted to know how you guys maybe were more appealing than others.
Well, first of all, hope you feel better. It was, yes, as you'd imagine, because people were looking for online options, and this was their online, and it was already experienced, and in fact was used in lieu of the hours in the building. Since many buildings were closed, this was an opportunity to continue the field experience. Because, and one thing to note, and obviously if it wasn't, just to be overt about it, the goal in any sim, right? We talked about the idea of context, and it's important that we harness the power of stories from the engagement perspective, right? So if experience is the best teacher, then it needs to be a memorable experience. So how do we make this memorable enough and sticky enough that it sticks with you like a real experience? And so part of that is the narrative, right? It's story based, so it's engaging from a story perspective, and that's good. But in order to really make it so that I'm seeing myself in the action, so it's my experience and not just reading about somebody else's, the story needs to be recognizable and authentic. And in order to achieve that, that's why we do the collaboration with the practitioners. So in our collaboration with West Alabama, it's based on their experiences, and Dr. Mayfield in particular's experiences in having been a teacher, having been there, and then work with many students in dealing with this, and obviously teaching them. It's bringing that. So again, it's not my classroom, but it could be. And they're not my people, but they're not my students, but they could be, so that we see ourselves in the action. In our mind's eye, we're seeing our classroom, we're seeing our students, and we're thinking about the experience that we're having, but it becomes ours. And we can get into the neuroscience, we could wonk out if you wanted, but in terms of being able to make sure that, so that was the experience that it certainly gave us. We were well positioned, if you will, with the library that we had at the time. We've continued to expand it, but to provide that space, and as Andrea mentioned in their program now, right, this is to prepare you for better field experience, right?
Yes.
So have some experiences so that you can better harness what's happening when you get into the field, rather than swimming and floundering potentially in the field. Have some experiences first so that you can actually gain valuable experience when it's actually for real.
And the university here uses the entire library of Sims in various courses. So
Okay.
relevant Sims are used based on the course.
So do you guys, does your company, or I'm sorry, I'm not too sure how to address it, but I noticed when working with our education specialist here in California, we have limited options to see different learning environments, such as homeschooling or homebound instruction or an ED classroom. And so during the pandemic, we really were looking for something that truly specialized in that education specialist, special education field, not just like resource. And so have you ever thought about expanding a little bit further on that?
All the time. So, I'm a carpenter with a hammer in my hand and everything looks like a sim. So, what we look for is opportunities where, people raise their hand and say, I got a problem of practice I'd like to capture. And I think that would be valuable to look at in this modality. And that's how the library grows. So it really is important. We started actually in leadership, and my thinking was, at the time, if you don't have leadership, with respect to reform or change, we're not going to get anywhere systemically. So start with leadership, but obviously teachers need, counselors has expanded, special ed, looking at other school environments. Obviously those things are all critical. Context is key, right? Because you can look at the same problem, but in a different context, and it becomes a different sim. And again, you you can't get enough experience, right? There's no, we don't fill that bucket ever, right? Every experience is valuable. So absolutely, it's an opportunity. We just look for collaborators with whom to do it.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you again. Please feel free to, and I will put my email in chat as well. Feel free to reach out, or if you got the QR code, by all means. I'd love to share more with you. If you have questions about the GROW model, about character ed, about what's going on at West Alabama, obviously, Dr. Mayfield will be happy, I'm sure, to connect with you. And any information about Sims, etc., as broad or as narrow as you'd like to talk. As you can probably tell, it doesn't take much to wind me up. So happy to chat with you about it. And look, it is, from my standpoint, when you look at what's going on in education, this is necessary, right? I mean, it's our kids that we're dealing with, and anything that can be done to improve their experience in the classroom, in the building, is a good thing. And if this can contribute, it's in our interest to do that. So please feel free to be in touch.
It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you for participating, and hope to see you again soon. Look for our next webinar. And if you're going to be at AACT, I will be at AACT. I will not be at AASA because they're the same time. But please come find me. We'll have a table. We'll also be presenting, and look forward to being in touch. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank y'all.